Children were dying in the dusty lands of the Ndlovu Chiefdom, yet hidden behind the tall walls of the chief's residence, water flowed freely. No one understood why. The drought had lasted so long that many villagers had forgotten the smell of wet soil. Rivers had shrunk into winding scars of white sand. Fields that once carried maize and pumpkins now lay cracked beneath the unforgiving South African sun. Still, while the people suffered, one person remained protected above all others: Princess Ayanda. Throughout the chiefdom, everyone knew the strange law: the princess must never allow her bare feet to touch the earth. Not for a second, not for a single step, whenever she left the chief's residence. Woven carpets were laid across every path before her. If the journey was long, strong guards carried her on an elevated chair decorated with carved ivory and bright beadwork. Inside the chief's residence, servants rushed ahead of her, placing animal hides and thick mats beneath her feet. The people whispered endlessly. Some claimed she carried an ancient curse. Others said the ancestors had marked her at birth. A few believed touching the ground would unleash a disaster upon the chiefdom, but nobody knew the truth. Not even Princess Ayanda herself. And the secret her father guarded was slowly destroying Ndlovu village. At the edge of the village lived a boy named Sipho. Though only 8 years old, hardship had forced him to grow up quickly. His hands were rough from digging in dry soil, and his face carried worries no child should bear. He lived with his younger sister, Themba, since a terrible sickness had taken their parents years earlier. Sipho had become her protector, provider, and closest friend. Every morning, the two siblings sat beside the dusty road watching the chief's procession pass by. The princess always looked beautiful. Her dresses shimmered like morning light on water, and colorful beads decorated her braided hair. Yet Sipho noticed something others rarely saw. She never looked happy. Her eyes carried a sadness that seemed too heavy for someone who possessed everything. Sometimes she stared longingly at the ground below, as if she desperately wanted to run barefoot through the village like every other child. One afternoon, Themba tugged gently on her brother's sleeve. "Why doesn't the princess play outside with us?" she asked. Sipho watched the distant procession disappear beyond a cloud of dust. "I don't know," he answered quietly, but deep inside, he felt something was terribly wrong. Months passed without a single cloud appearing in the sky. The drought tightened its grip on the Ndlovu Chiefdom like a giant hand squeezing the life from the land. The once mighty Malabini River had vanished, leaving behind only cracked earth and scattered stones. Goats wandered weakly through the village searching for grass that no longer existed. Cattle stood motionless beneath thorn trees, their ribs showing through their skin. Each day became harder than the last. Mothers walked for hours searching for water, often returning with empty buckets. Children cried themselves to sleep with dry mouths and empty stomachs. Yet high above the village, on a rocky hill overlooking the valley, stood the great residence of Chief Themba. Behind its thick stone walls was a deep underground spring. Unlike every other water source in the chiefdom, it never dried up. The chief guarded it fiercely. Heavy wooden gates remained closed day and night. Armed guards watched every entrance. No villager was allowed near the precious water. People began to whisper that the chief cared more about protecting his daughter than protecting his people. Those whispers grew louder with each passing week. Sipho heard them everywhere. He heard them at the market. He heard them beside cooking fires. He heard them among the elders gathered beneath the old baobab tree. But whispers could not save Themba. Each evening, Sipho watched his little sister grow weaker. The sparkle that once filled her eyes was fading. Her cheeks had become thin. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night asking for water, and all Sipho could offer was a few drops he had carefully saved. One afternoon, while Themba rested beneath a blanket inside their small hut, Sipho made a decision. If he could somehow enter the chief's residence, perhaps he could find a way to help his sister. Perhaps he could even learn why the chief refused to share the water. The next morning, Sipho climbed the steep pathway leading toward the hill. The massive wooden gate 2 guards blocked his way. They laughed when they saw the small boy standing before them. "What business does a child have here?" one guard asked. Sipho lifted his chin. "I can work," he replied. "I can clean, carry water, wash pots, anything." The guards laughed even harder, but before they could send him away, an elderly woman emerged from the residence. Her name was Gogo Namsa. She supervised the kitchens and was respected by everyone who worked there. Her silver hair was wrapped in a colorful headscarf, and wisdom filled her gentle eyes. She studied Sipho carefully. Unlike the guards, she saw determination rather than weakness. Finally, she nodded. "Let the boy enter." The guards exchanged surprised glances but obeyed. For the first time in his life, Sipho stepped inside the great residence. It felt like entering another world. The air smelled of roasted meat and fresh herbs. Beautiful gardens surrounded the buildings. Fountains trickled softly despite the drought, devastating the village below. Everywhere he looked, there was water, enough water to save countless lives. Anger stirred inside him. How could the chief allow his people to suffer while so much remained hidden here? Gogo Namsa assigned him simple tasks. He scrubbed cooking pots until they shone. He swept courtyards. He washed the special animal hide mats used by Princess Ayanda. Every evening he secretly carried leftover food home to Themba. The extra meals helped, but they could not solve the larger problem. The village still needed water, and every day, Sipho noticed something strange. The entire residence revolved around protecting Princess Ayanda from touching the earth. Servants inspected every path. Before she walked, guards removed even the smallest stones whenever she moved from one building to another. Carpets were rolled out immediately. The atmosphere felt tense. Everyone lived in fear of making a mistake. One afternoon, while carrying freshly cleaned mats across the central courtyard, Sipho finally saw the princess up close. Ayanda sat alone on a carved wooden bench. A brightly colored sunbird fluttered inside a nearby cage. Instead of admiring the bird, the princess stared at a patch of bare ground beyond the courtyard. Her expression was filled with longing. It was the look of someone imprisoned. For several moments, she simply watched the earth, the dry soil, the dust, the simple ground every child in Ndlovu village walked upon every day. Suddenly, an elderly servant approached carrying a rolled carpet. His hands trembled with age. As he moved forward, his foot caught against a loose stone. The carpet slipped from his grasp. It tumbled away. A wide section of exposed earth appeared directly in front of the princess. Instantly, the courtyard fell silent. Every servant froze. Every guard stopped breathing. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Princess Ayanda slowly rose from her seat. Her eyes widened. For a brief moment, she stepped toward the exposed ground. Curiosity shone across her face. She looked almost excited. Then a thunderous voice shattered the silence. "Stop!" Chief Themba stormed into the courtyard. His face was twisted with terror and fury. He rushed forward, grabbing Ayanda's arm before she could move another step. The princess recoiled in shock. The chief turned toward the elderly servant. His eyes burned with panic. "You fool!" he roared. The old man immediately dropped to his knees. "My chief, please forgive me." But the chief refused to listen. He ordered his guards to drag the servant away. The poor man cried and begged for mercy as he was pulled across the courtyard. Sipho watched from behind a stone pillar. His heart pounded. This was more than an ordinary rule. The chief looked genuinely terrified, not angry. Terrified. As if allowing his daughter to touch the ground would bring disaster upon them all. After the servant was taken away, Chief Themba personally carried Princess Ayanda back toward her tower. The princess looked confused and frightened, and for the first time, Sipho realized something important. The chief's secret was much bigger than anyone imagined. Whatever truth lay hidden behind those walls had the power to explain everything. The drought, the water, the strange law, and perhaps the fate of the entire chiefdom. The following morning, Sipho could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed in the courtyard. The fear in Chief Themba's eyes had been real. No father reacted that way over something as simple as dirt. Something far darker was hidden behind the strange rule. Sipho became determined to uncover the truth. A few days later, Gogo Namsa assigned him a new task. He was to clean the large windows on the outside of Princess Ayanda's tower. The tower rose high above the rest of the residents, overlooking the entire chiefdom. Balancing carefully on a wooden ladder, Sipho wiped dust from the glass while the dry wind tugged at his clothes. As he worked, one of the windows suddenly opened. Sipho nearly lost his balance. Princess Ayanda leaned out. Her eyes widened with surprise when she recognized him. "You are the village boy," she said softly, "the one who carries the mats." Sipho nodded nervously. He expected her to call the guards. Instead, she smiled. It was a sad smile. A lonely smile. "You live down there?" she asked, pointing toward the distant village. "Yes, princess." For a moment, she remained silent. Then she asked a question that completely surprised him. "What does the earth feel like?" Sipho blinked. "The earth?" Ayanda nodded eagerly. "The real earth. Not the carpets. Not the hides. The actual ground." Sipho stared at her. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. This girl had never touched the ground. Not once. "It depends," he answered. "Right now, it's hard and dry because of the drought. But when the rains come, it becomes soft. It squishes between your toes. It smells fresh and alive." The princess closed her eyes. A faint smile crossed her face as she imagined it. "I've always wanted to know." Sipho felt a sudden ache in his chest. For the first time, he realized that Ayanda was just as trapped as anyone else. Perhaps even more. "My father says the earth is dangerous," she said quietly. "He says terrible things will happen if I touch it." Sipho frowned. "The earth isn't dangerous." Ayanda opened her eyes. "Then why am I forbidden?" Sipho had no answer. Before he could speak, a horn sounded somewhere below. The princess quickly stepped away from the window. "My attendants are coming." She hesitated. Then she looked back at him. "Thank you for telling me." The window closed, but the conversation stayed in Sipho's mind all day. The princess truly knew nothing. She had spent her entire life imprisoned by a secret she didn't understand. That evening, disaster struck the village once again. A delegation of elders climbed the hill to beg the chief for help. Sipho watched from the kitchen courtyard as they knelt before the entrance. Their clothes were dusty, their faces were lined with suffering. One elder lifted an empty wooden bowl. "Great chief," he pleaded, "our crops are dead. Our livestock are dying. Children are collapsing from thirst. Please open the spring. Let the people share in the water." Chief Themba appeared on the balcony above them. For several long moments, he said nothing. Then his expression hardened. "The water within these walls belongs to the chiefdom's leadership." Gasps spread among the elders. "If it is shared carelessly, it will be exhausted." "But our people are dying," another elder cried. The chief turned away. "Pray for rain." Then he disappeared inside. The elders left brokenhearted. Sipho stood frozen. His anger grew stronger than ever. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, he made a dangerous decision. He would search the residence himself. There had to be answers somewhere. Carrying a small oil lamp, Sipho slipped through dark corridors rarely used by servants. Dust coated the floors. Spider webs hung from forgotten corners. Eventually, he reached an old section of the residence that seemed abandoned. At the end of a narrow hallway stood a wooden door. It was slightly open. Curiosity pulled him forward. Sipho pushed the door gently. The hinges creaked. Inside was a hidden chamber. The room smelled of age and secrets. Ancient scrolls filled wooden shelves. Faded shields decorated the walls. Most striking of all were the enormous paintings hanging around the room. Sipho lifted his lamp. The first painting showed a younger Chief Themba kneeling in a field during a terrible drought. In his arms lay a tiny infant wrapped in blankets. The child appeared lifeless. The chief's face was filled with grief. The second painting showed the chief entering a sacred mountain cave beneath a storm-filled sky. Lightning flashed around him. Shadowy figures floated among the clouds. The final painting made Sipho's blood run cold. The storm spirits were lowering a glowing sphere of blue light into the chest of the infant. Beneath the image were ancient words written in faded ink. The heavens may grant life, but the earth always claims what belongs to it. Sipho's heart raced. The baby was Princess Ayanda. Suddenly, a voice spoke behind him. "You were not supposed to find this room." Sipho spun around. His lamp nearly fell from his hands. Standing in the doorway was Gogo Namsa. She held a lantern. Her expression was not angry. It was sad. Very sad. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then the elderly woman sighed heavily. "I suppose the ancestors wanted you to know." She stepped into the room and looked at the paintings. "The chief has hidden this truth for many years." Sipho swallowed hard. "What happened to the princess?" Gogo Namsa sat slowly on a wooden chair. The lantern light danced across her wrinkled face. Then she began speaking. 10 years ago, Princess Ayanda was born during the worst drought our people had ever seen. Her voice trembled, but she never took her first breath. Sipho's eyes widened. The chief was devastated. He carried her body into the sacred caves of the Drakensberg Mountains and begged the ancient sky spirits for mercy. The spirits answered. Sipho listened without blinking. They agreed to restore the child. But every gift from the spirit world demands a price. The room suddenly felt colder. The sky spirits placed a living fragment of rain inside her heart. Sipho stared at her. "A fragment of rain?" Gogo Namsa nodded. "Princess Ayanda is not entirely human. Part of her soul belongs to the clouds, part belongs to the storms, part belongs to the rain itself." The lantern flickered. Outside, the wind howled against the walls. "And if she touches the earth?" Sipho whispered. The old woman's face darkened. "The earth has been waiting for her." A chill ran through Sipho's body. The moment her bare skin touches natural soil, the earth will recognize the rain spirit hidden within her. Gogo Namsa lowered her voice, "And it will take it back." Silence filled the room. "The rain spirit will leave her body. Princess Ayanda will vanish." Sipho's mouth went dry. Everything suddenly made sense. The carpets, the guards, the chief's fear, the tower. But Gogo Namsa had not finished. "There is something even worse." Sipho looked up. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. "The sky spirits are angry. They never intended for their gift to remain trapped forever." She pointed toward the paintings. "As long as the rain spirit remains inside the princess, the heavens refuse to send rain." Sipho felt his stomach twist. "The drought." Gogo Namsa nodded. "The drought exists because Chief Themba refuses to let go." The room fell silent. Outside, the dry wind swept across the sleeping chiefdom. And for the first time, Sipho understood the terrible truth. The chief's love for his daughter was slowly destroying everyone else. The next morning, an uneasy tension hung over the great residence. Servants hurried through the corridors whispering among themselves. Guards stood at attention with worried expressions. Even the healers seemed frightened. Something was terribly wrong. Sipho noticed it immediately. When he asked one of the kitchen workers what had happened, the woman glanced around nervously before answering. "The princess is getting worse." Sipho's heart sank. He quickly carried a basket of supplies toward the upper levels of the residence, hoping to learn more. As he climbed the stone stairways, he overheard 2 guards speaking in hushed voices. "They say her hands are turning transparent. The healers cannot stop it. The chief hasn't slept in days." Fear tightened in Sipho's chest. Everything Gogo Namsa had revealed the night before was coming true. The drought was affecting Princess Ayanda herself. Because the rain spirit lived inside her, she needed moisture to survive. But the land had become so dry that even the magic sustaining her life was beginning to disappear. Later that afternoon, Sipho caught a glimpse of her through an open doorway. The sight nearly made him gasp. Princess Ayanda lay motionless on a large bed covered with blankets. Her skin seemed to glow faintly blue. Parts of her arms looked almost transparent, like water trapped inside glass. She appeared weaker than he had ever seen her. Beside her bed stood Chief Themba. The proud leader of the Ndlovu Chiefdom looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his shoulders sagged beneath the weight of fear. He barked orders at healers, he demanded remedies, he begged for solutions, but nobody could help. The healers understood what the chief refused to accept. This was not an illness. This was the rain spirit fading, and with every passing hour, Ayanda drifted closer to death. By sunset, Chief Themba made a decision, a terrible decision, one that would push the suffering villagers beyond their limits. The chief summoned his guards. His voice echoed through the courtyard, "Gather every drop of water remaining in the chiefdom." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked horrified, but none dared question him. Within minutes, armed men marched down the hill toward Ndlovu village carrying large barrels and empty containers. Sipho followed at a distance. What he witnessed broke his heart. The guards searched every hut. They confiscated hidden water jars. They took water stored for the elderly. They took water reserved for the sick. They even took tiny cups mothers had hidden for their children. The villagers pleaded. Some cried, others shouted in anger. But the guards obeyed the chief's command. By nightfall, every remaining drop had been taken. Back at the residence, enormous iron cauldrons were placed over roaring fires. The stolen water was poured inside. Soon thick clouds of steam rose into the night air. Workers used giant woven fans to direct the moisture toward Princess Ayanda's tower. Slowly, her room filled with warm mist. The chief hoped the moisture would preserve the rain spirit inside her. He hoped it would buy her more time, but the cost was devastating. The people below were left with nothing. Absolutely nothing. That evening, Sipho returned home. The village felt strangely silent. No conversations. No laughter. No sounds of cooking. Only the whisper of dry wind. Fear gripped him as he hurried toward his hut. When he entered, his heart nearly stopped. Thandi lay curled beneath a blanket. Her lips were cracked. Her breathing was shallow. She didn't move when he called her name. "Thandi," no answer. He knelt beside her. "Thandi, wake up." Her eyelids fluttered weakly. A faint sound escaped her throat. It was barely more than a whisper. Water. Tears filled Sipho's eyes. There was none. The small amount he had hidden for emergencies had been taken by the guards. His sister was dying, just like countless other children throughout the chiefdom. Sipho sat beside her through the night. He thought about everything he had learned. He thought about the starving villagers. He thought about Princess Ayanda trapped inside her tower. He thought about Chief Themba's desperate attempts to fight fate. Most of all, he thought about the terrible choice that had been forced upon everyone. One girl lived. Thousands suffered. The balance was wrong. As moonlight filtered through the doorway, Sipho finally stood. His eyes were red from crying, but something inside him had changed. Determination burned brighter than fear. He knew what he had to do. Princess Ayanda deserved to know the truth. The chief had spent her entire life hiding reality from her. She didn't know children were dying. She didn't know the drought existed because of the rain spirit within her. She didn't know innocent families were paying the price for her survival. If anyone could end this nightmare, it was her. Not the chief, not the healers, not the elders. Her. The decision terrified him. Sneaking into the princess's tower was dangerous. If he was caught, punishment would be severe. But when he looked at Thandi's frail body lying on the mat, his fear disappeared. Nothing mattered more than saving her. And saving the chiefdom. Near midnight, Sipho slipped quietly from the hut. The village slept beneath a sky empty of clouds. The moon illuminated the path leading toward the great residence. He moved quickly through the darkness, past silent fields, past abandoned wells, past dying trees. The massive walls of the residence soon appeared before him. Torches burned along the perimeter. Guards patrolled constantly. Entering through the gates was impossible. But Sipho remembered something. The ivy vines. The same vines that climbed the outer wall of Princess Ayanda's tower. Carefully, he circled to the rear of the residence. There they were. Thick green vines stretching upward toward the princess's balcony. Sipho swallowed nervously. The climb would be dangerous. One mistake could send him crashing to the rocks below. But there was no turning back. He grabbed the nearest vine, took a deep breath, and began climbing toward the tower, toward Princess Ayanda, toward the truth, and toward a choice that would change the fate of the entire Ndlovu Chiefdom forever. The climb felt endless. Sipho's arms burned with exhaustion as he pulled himself higher along the thick ivy vines clinging to Princess Ayanda's tower. Far below, the rocky ground seemed impossibly distant. One slip would mean certain death, but thoughts of Themba pushed him onward. Every painful movement reminded him why he had come at last. He reached the stone balcony, breathing heavily. He pulled himself over the edge and collapsed onto the cold floor. For several moments he simply lay there, gathering strength. Then he stood and looked toward the partially open doors leading into the princess's chamber. Warm mist drifted through the doorway. The room glowed with soft blue light. Sipho stepped inside. The air felt strangely different, almost magical. Princess Ayanda sat upright in her bed. She looked even weaker than before. Her skin shimmered faintly like sunlight reflecting on water. Parts of her hands were nearly transparent. She looked up suddenly. When she saw Sipho, her eyes widened. "You!" She struggled to sit straighter. "How did you get here?" Sipho ignored the question. "There was no time. Princess, you need to hear the truth." Ayanda immediately sensed the seriousness in his voice. Her expression changed. "What truth?" Sipho stepped closer. "My sister is dying." The princess lowered her gaze. "I am sorry. It isn't only my sister," he continued. "Children throughout the chiefdom are dying." Confusion crossed her face. "What do you mean?" Sipho took a deep breath. Then he told her everything, every terrible detail. He told her about the drought, about the empty rivers, about starving families, about the elders begging Chief Themba for water, about the guards taking the village's final supply, and finally, he told her what Gogo Namsa had revealed, the story of her birth, the sacred cave, the sky spirits, the rain spirit living inside her heart. As Sipho spoke, silence filled the room. Ayanda listened without interrupting. Her face slowly drained of color. The world she thought she knew crumbled around her. "My father never told me any of this," she whispered. "He couldn't." Sipho's voice trembled. "He was afraid." The princess looked down at her glowing hands. Small tears formed in her eyes, but these were not ordinary tears. Each drop sparkled like crystal water. When they landed on her blankets, tiny bursts of blue light flashed. She stared at them. The truth was impossible to deny. "My whole life," she whispered, "was built on a lie." Neither spoke for a while. Only the distant crackling of torches could be heard. Finally, Ayanda rose slowly from the bed. She walked toward the balcony. Outside, the chiefdom lay beneath a blanket of darkness. The villages, the fields, the dry riverbeds, the suffering people, all hidden beneath the moonlight. She imagined thirsty children trying to sleep. She imagined mothers searching desperately for water. She imagined little Themba struggling to breathe. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not tears of fear, tears of understanding. "I always wondered why I felt drawn to the earth," she said softly. Sipho looked at her. Ayanda smiled sadly. "When I looked at the ground, I felt something calling me." The wind stirred her hair. "Now I understand." Her voice grew stronger. "It was home." Suddenly, bang! The bedroom doors burst open. Chief Themba stormed inside. His face was wild with panic. Behind him rushed several guards carrying spears. The chief's eyes immediately found Sipho. "You!" he roared. "Get away from my daughter!" The guards moved forward. Sipho froze, but before anyone could touch him, Princess Ayanda stepped between them. "Stop!" The word echoed through the chamber. Everyone froze, even the guards hesitated. Something had changed. The princess's voice now carried the sound of rushing rivers and distant thunder. Chief Themba stared at her. "Ayanda!" His voice trembled. "You don't understand." "I understand everything." The chief's face went pale. The silence that followed felt endless. Then tears filled his eyes. No, he shook his head desperately. No, 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 he already knew. Somewhere deep inside, he knew exactly what she had decided. You cannot leave me. Ayanda walked toward him. For the first time in years, she embraced her father. Chief Themba broke down, the powerful leader who ruled an entire chiefdom suddenly looked like a frightened old man. I only wanted to save you, he whispered. Ayanda rested her head against his chest. I know. They stood together for several moments, father and daughter, bound by love, destroyed by love. Then, Ayanda gently stepped away. The people should never have paid the price for my life. No, the chief reached for her, but she continued backing toward the balcony. Ayanda, please? The guards watched helplessly. Sipho watched silently. The princess turned toward the open night sky. Moonlight illuminated her glowing figure. She looked almost like a spirit. Already, father, her voice softened. I love you. Chief Themba collapsed to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. Please, don't go. But Ayanda had already made her choice, a choice no one else was brave enough to make. She stepped onto the balcony. The wind immediately swirled around her. Blue light flowed from beneath her skin. The clouds above began to stir. For the first time in months, thunder rumbled in the distance. The princess smiled, a peaceful smile, the smile of someone finally free. Then she stepped from the balcony. The chief screamed. Sipho rushed forward. The guards gasped, but Ayanda did not fall. For a brief moment, she seemed to float, suspended between earth and sky. Then her bare feet touched the dry soil of the garden below. Everything exploded. A blinding pillar of blue light shot into the heavens. The ground shook violently. The air crackled with power. Thunder roared across the mountains. Chief Themba covered his eyes. Sipho fell to the floor. The entire chiefdom trembled. When the light finally faded, Princess Ayanda was gone. In her place stood a towering fountain of pure crystal water. It surged from the earth and soared into the sky, higher, 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 until it touched the clouds themselves. The heavens answered. Instantly, dark storm clouds rolled across the horizon. Lightning flashed. Thunder shook the valleys. Then, rain. At first it was only a few drops, then hundreds, then thousands. Within moments, the sky opened completely. Heavy rain poured across the Ndlovu Chiefdom. Villagers rushed from their homes. Children lifted their faces toward the sky. Women cried tears of joy. Men laughed and danced in the mud. The dry riverbeds filled once more. The thirsty earth drank deeply. Life returned back in the village. Raindrops splashed against Thandi's face. Slowly, her eyes opened. She smiled weakly. Then she raised her hands toward the falling rain and drank. All around her, the chiefdom awakened. The drought was over. The curse was broken. The rain spirit had finally returned home. High above the village, Sipho stood beside the balcony. Rain soaked his clothes. Tears mixed with the water on his face. Princess Ayanda was gone. Yet, somehow she was everywhere. In every raindrop. In every river. In every green shoot pushing through the soil. Chief Themba remained kneeling in the tower, heartbroken. But, for the first time in many years, he understood something important. Love is not possession. Love is sacrifice. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is let go. And as the rain continued falling across the valleys of South Africa, the people of the Ndlovu Chiefdom would forever remember the brave girl who carried the rain inside her heart and gave everything to save her people. And from that day forward, whenever storms rolled across the mountains and rain danced upon the earth, the elders would tell the children a story, the story of Princess Ayanda, the girl made of rain. If you've stayed this far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more interesting videos.